The world of automotive television has always been built on the shimmering illusion of grease-stained authenticity. We watch these shows believing we are seeing the genuine passion of experts who dedicate their lives to the resurrection of classic metal. But in 2020, behind the polished exterior of Wheeler Dealers, a storm was brewing that would reveal just how dark things could get. Ant Anstead, the charismatic British mechanic who had stepped into the monumental shoes of Ed China, was navigating a perfect storm of professional upheaval and personal devastation. While the cameras kept rolling and the cars kept being restored, Anstead was fighting a battle for his very sanity in the shadows of the television industry. This is the story not just of a departure, but of a man who was driven to his breaking point, and how the Wheeler Dealers franchise became a backdrop to one of the darkest periods of his life. When Ant Anstead joined Wheeler Dealers in 2017, he knew he was walking into a minefield. He wasn't just any new hire, he was the man replacing a legend. Ed China had been the heart and soul of the show's mechanical side for 13 seasons, and his departure had been anything but smooth. China had walked away citing creative differences with the new American producers, who he claimed wanted to reduce his detailed workshop segments and cut corners, a move that compromised his professional integrity. This was a creative and ideological rupture that left the fanbase reeling, and many of them were furious. This was the atmosphere Anstead walked into. He was the new television husband for Mike Brewer, but a significant portion of the audience viewed him as an interloper. As Mark Priestley, who would later replace Anstead, observed, the controversy surrounding Ed's exit was a major talking point that he was acutely aware of. The specter of a hostile fanbase loomed large, and the pressure on Anstead to validate his position was immense. He had to prove he wasn't just a temporary fill-in, but the rightful heir to a much-loved throne. The show's immediate shift in direction didn't help. When Anstead took over, Wheeler Dealers moved to a new workshop in Southern California, a hub for car culture. On the surface, it was an exciting opportunity for the U.S. market. However, behind the scenes, the production had become more streamlined, and the essence of the show, the deep dive into restoration, was becoming somewhat diluted. Longtime fans complained about the choice of cars and the perceived reduction in the home mechanic appeal, with some even noting that the number of credited mechanics in the credits had multiplied, suggesting Anstead was not doing all the heavy lifting himself. This rumor that the on-screen mechanic often didn't perform the vast majority of the work gnawed at the fabric of the show's authenticity. It reinforced the idea that Anstead was a presenter, not a mechanic, in an environment where Ed China had always been the real deal. The man was fighting a war on two fronts, defending his reputation against the shadow of Ed China and defending the show's integrity against accusations of becoming too manufactured. While the professional pressures were mounting, Ant Anstead's personal life was disintegrating in a spectacularly public fashion. In September 2020, Anstead and his wife, HGTV star Christina Anstead, announced their separation after less than 2 years of marriage. To the public, it was just another celebrity breakup. To Ant, it was a catastrophic event that plunged him into a very dark place. He later revealed that the toll on his mental and physical health was severe. The stress decimated his sleep and his diet, leading to a shocking weight loss of more than 20 pounds. As he described it, the impact was devastating, marking a period where he teetered on the edge of a complete breakdown. The irony is devastatingly cruel. While cameras were rolling on Wheeler Dealers, capturing the banter and the builds, Anstead was in the throes of a mental health crisis. He was losing weight at an alarming rate, his stress levels were through the roof, and his carefully constructed world was collapsing. He would go on to describe the breakup as devastating not just for him, but for his children from his first marriage, whom he considers his best friends. He was forced to have a very, very difficult FaceTime call to inform his children, Amelie and Archie, that their family was splitting up. This was happening in the middle of a high-stakes, high-pressure TV production. The darkness he was experiencing was the antithesis of the vibrant, energetic persona he projected on screen. He had to compartmentalize his grief, putting on a brave face to dismantle a Mustang or rebuild a Jaguar while his personal world was falling apart. The dark place was more than just sadness, it was a place of profound physical and emotional exhaustion, where the line between surviving and succumbing was terrifyingly thin. The final blow to his tenure on Wheeler Dealers came not from a dramatic fight, but from a quiet, logistical decision that felt like a betrayal of his new life. In late 2020, as the world grappled with a global pandemic, Mike Brewer's mother became desperately ill. Brewer, citing his need to be close to his family in the UK, made the decision to move the entire production back to Britain. This was a monumental shift. The show had been based in the US for years, and Anstead had built his new life there. He was now Mr. Hollywood, a man whose life had become anchored to the States by the birth of his son, Hudson, and the shared custody arrangements that followed his split with Christina. He was trapped. Mike Brewer went to Ant and had a compassionate conversation, urging him to stay in America with his family. Brewer called him the most loving person and most wonderful person I have ever worked with. Despite this, the reality was harsh. If the production moved to the UK, Anstead could not follow. To do so would have meant abandoning his young son and violating the custody agreement. That was a lifeline to his child. He had to choose between his career and his family. He chose his family. This was not a firing, it was a forced exit due to circumstances beyond anyone's control. The show announced in November 2020 that Mark Elvis Priestley would be taking over as the main mechanic, but Anstead would make occasional appearances. On the surface, it was a friendly, amicable split. But for Anstead, it represented the loss of yet another pillar of stability in his life. The narrative provided to the public was one of compromise and friendship. Ant and Mike stood together, assuring fans that there were no hard feelings. But the subtext was profoundly dark. Anstead had been offered a 5-year contract when he moved to America. He had uprooted his life for a promise, and within a few short years, he found himself working on a show that he felt was drifting from its roots while simultaneously facing the crushing weight of a divorce that left him physically broken. He wasn't just leaving the show, he was surviving. He described his path to recovery as a choice: dwell in the darkness or slap myself around the face a few times and find a way to heal. He turned to a 35-day online breakup recovery course and a faith-based retreat to pull himself out of the abyss. The darker reality is that while the Wheeler Dealers production churned on, Ant Anstead was a man on the edge. He was overworking himself, not just on the show, but in his personal life as a car builder and designer, trying to fill a void. It wasn't until a severe, freaky footy accident years later, detaching his pectoral muscle and tearing his rotator cuff and labrum, that he was forced to physically stop. The injury was a sign. It forced a reset, a hard look at his health that the stress and trauma of the previous years had demanded but which he had been unable to grant himself. In a sense, the departure from Wheeler Dealers wasn't the end of his darkness, it was the beginning of a long, arduous climb out of it. Ant Anstead's final days on Wheeler Dealers are a stark reminder that the reality we see on our screens is a carefully curated fiction. While we watched him wrestle with engine mounts and swap transmissions, he was wrestling with his own demons. He stepped into a toxic fan culture that was ready to hate him, had his professional credibility questioned by a public who saw Ed China as irreplaceable, and then endured a public divorce that ravaged his physical and mental health, all while contractually obligated to maintain a cheerful demeanor for the cameras. The show didn't destroy him, but it was the backdrop to his darkest hour. The departure wasn't a dramatic scandal, it was a quiet, heartbreaking necessity. Today, Anstead is in a different place. The injury he sustained years later forced him to adopt a new philosophy, focusing on diet, peptides, and self-care. He is proof that even at the brink of darkness, a person can find a way back. He used the very platform that caused him so much stress to build a new career, starring in shows like Celebrity IOU, Joyride, and The World's Greatest Cars. The darkness of his final days on Wheeler Dealers transformed him from a television mechanic into a man who understands that success is meaningless without health and happiness. His story isn't just about the end of an era on a car show, it's a testament to the human spirit's capacity to survive a public breakdown and rebuild.